Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. So, let me see. Everyone is here. Joseph, Lawrence, Good Joe, David, Angel. What a great pleasure to have you all join us here today. I'm so excited because all of you are my good friends and also you are all great leaders working to create a better Hong Kong. And this is the perfect time for us to be discussing how we can enhance and leverage our dear city's strengths. As China reopens after the pandemic, as globalization shifts its gear in face of geopolitical uncertainty, Hong Kong must keep innovating and improving to show the world our attractions and to support our motherland in all ways. From renminbi internationalization to fintech, from blockchain finance to family wealth management, I look forward to hearing from you all what you have to say on these very good topics. Joseph, the global financial landscape has changed significantly since the start of the pandemic. How would Hong Kong government characterize our new role in this landscape and what new doors have opened for the city as IFC?
Thank you, Dale. And well, first of all, I'd like to thank Bernie and the foundation for having me here today. Well, before we talk about the future, we mentioned about pandemic and the changes over the last few years. I want to first do a quick recap of where we stand as an international financial center. Because although the pandemic did affect many ways in our lives and the economy in terms of disrupting the supply chain and also how being business was conducted, I think from the financial market perspective, our figures remain strong, and I'll share that with you. If we look at the equity market last year and funds raised through IPO, we ranked number 4 in the world. Actually, number 1 and 2 was Shanghai and Shenzhen. Number 3 was NASDAQ. So if you're talking about capital free flow market, we actually ranked number 1 in Asia or number 2 in the world. In bond market, we ranked number 1 as a center for arranging Asian international bonds 7 consecutive years, topping the league table. Insurance, we continue to rank number 2 in the world and number 1 in Asia in terms of insurance density and insurance penetration rate. If we look at the banking system, despite the fact that in the last year or two, globally, there were pressure on liquidity, so on and so forth, the total amount of bank deposit in Hong Kong grew by 4.6% in 2021 and grew by another 1.7% in 2022. When it comes into asset and wealth management business, the latest report was released last year. At the end of 2021, our AUM reached close to $4.6 trillion across 19, 20, and 21 through 2 years of pandemic. We actually grew by 48% of AUM across that 3-year period. So you reckon that despite the challenge from pandemic, it might have changed a certain way how we conduct business, but we continue to be in a position of strength and position of scales. And indeed, our business on the market kept growing. So one might ask, so why is that? I think one reason behind this is pandemic or may change our concern, short-term concerns on supply chain, on travel restriction. But what is our core competitiveness? What makes Hong Kong special is down to, I think, rather than what Ronnie mentioned, which is one country, two system, right? Under one country, we provide preferential access to the mainland market. So when international financial institutions or investors looking for access to opportunities in mainland China, the second largest economy and keep growing strongly, Hong Kong is the location. And under two systems, right, we offer free flow of capital, free convertibility of Hong Kong dollars, common law system, and also our regulatory regime compatible with most of the major markets, and of course, our simple and low tax regime as well. So I think all these long-term competitiveness of Hong Kong remain the same, and that's explain why remain strong and keep growing regardless of the short-term sentiment per se. Moving forward, I would say, as I mentioned multiple times, I think through pandemic, technology is being adopted in a massive way. Fintech development, of course, advanced very quickly. Over the last few years now in Hong Kong, we have granted license to 4 virtual insurers, 8 virtual banks. Our own infrastructure, the faster payment system, over the last few years, we have now get around, we're talking about 12 million registrations under that as well. And at the end of October last year, we see that virtual assets is a business opportunity. It poses certain challenges because of the technology, blockchain and so, but I think what we should do is we should embrace the challenges and leverage on that to capture business opportunities. So we will adopt what we call a same activity, same risk, same rule principle to embrace these challenges and develop the business in virtual assets. So we actually promulgated our policy statement on development of virtual assets in Hong Kong at the end of October last year. And actually since December last year, we have 3 virtual asset futures ETFs listed in Hong Kong already. And in June this year, the new licensing regime for virtual asset service providers will commence operation. I reckon I'm using up my time already, although I only halfway through what I want to say. The last 30 seconds, I think the other change that we observed over the last few years is that ESG, green finance, have come in a big way. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are already the leader in asset management, in bond issuance, in equities, so on and so forth. But ESG will play a big role. So if we do not do ESG right, not only we will not win new businesses, but we might lose our existing market shares. So we embrace it with various initiatives, such as the government green bond program, such as a green and sustainable finance grant scheme. I'm happy to share with you that, let's say, last year in 2022, the total amount of green and sustainable debts issued in Hong Kong reached $80.5 billion. Is amount which is 5 times of 2020, so we're growing strongly. If we look at the ESG funds registered in Hong Kong, authorized by SFC at the end of last year, we're talking about 177 ESG funds authorized here. It's an increase of 86% in terms of number of funds. So you'll see that I think ESG, fintech are the way to go, and the government continue to put up different measures to support this growth. Maybe I should stop here to save some time for the rest.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you.
That's really fantastic. A lot of good news for Hong Kong, and also the Hong Kong new government administration since last July 1st. You guys have been working around the clock to help Hong Kong, so thank you. Lawrence, Joseph outlined many forward-looking visions that we are all embracing. A core prerequisite for this is Hong Kong's strong common law system, which you know very well, which has been a key source of confidence and trust for international investors. What are the particular highlights for investors that you would like us to consider as we emerge from the pandemic? And Hong Kong as an IFC, how can Hong Kong leverage your unique strengths of the common law to enhance our connection between the mainland, GBA, and the global market? Thank you.
Oh, this is a bit of a long question. You know what? I caught one word, prerequisite. And Daryl, thanks for using that word. Law is not an afterthought. It doesn't become relevant only when you have disputes. It is, thank you for using the word prerequisite. On a personal note, could I begin on a personal note by saying I was sitting here listening to the beginning speakers, and I thought to myself, I texted Bernie, who's left, oh, culture and law are the 2 new topics now. Not really, because as you say, that is the prerequisite to things. But finally, I realized why the government appointed a barrister to chair the Financial Services Development Council. So I actually do have something to say, I suppose. And it is this. The question is about how common law helps, how Hong Kong's legal system helps. To answer the question, let's pause. When we think about finance and law, we tend to think about securities law, we think about regulation. I know Gu Cho thinks about that a lot, sometimes in positive ways, sometimes not. Interesting relationship between exchange and regulator, where the law comes in to help too. But actually, if you are talking about Hong Kong as an international financial center, or any place as a place to do business, law is relevant to you not just because, and frankly, mostly not because of regulation. It's because it affects you. It affects the banker. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, how am I going to illustrate this? And it occurred to me, I actually do quite a bit of employment cases for financial professionals. I sit on the International Court of Qatar in Doha, and that court has jurisdiction over essentially 4 things: regulatory things, contractual things where they opt for the international court. 3, prudential things, so if it has to do with prudential capital. And 4, which account for a large part of the regulatory tribunals and international courts' work, is employment. And it's because if you want international financial professionals to come work in Hong Kong, they want to operate not just for their professional business, but at a personal level in an environment that they're comfortable with. Their employment is governed by rules they are familiar with. Their property is governed by rules they're familiar with. So people, if you choose to buy a house, if you choose to rent, hopefully a palatial flat, that costs a little bit of money, you want to make sure that all those rights and obligations are familiar to you. And so common law actually comes in many, many ways. I also went to the source of this new hype about common law in Hong Kong, and that comes from the presidency's speech on July 1st last year. I finally got around to reading the full text, I must confess. I mostly relied on press release, but today I went to the full text, and I realized it actually mentions common law twice. First, it mentioned common law as part of Hong Kong's success in one country, two system, and part of the achievements that we have made in the last 25 years, that common law has continued to thrive. So that's looking back. And it mentions common law again, looking forward, as how it will contribute, how it is an essential part of Hong Kong's unique advantage. And I was sitting there thinking, well, it's rare for common law to be mentioned by a national leader. Most national leaders of whatever country tends to pay lip service, and they say rule of law, independence of judiciary, so on and so forth. And so it is an example of a national leader talking about the content of the law, which is rare in itself. And 2, if one actually pause and think, you know what, common law it's a essentially British in roots thing, all right? It has grown to be a much more international enterprise, but it is British in roots, English in roots, actually, not even British in roots. And for a Chinese national leader to recognize the value of this, it's truly embracing that, you know what, whatever thing comes out of the English tradition, the American tradition, the Chinese tradition, East or West, if it is good for embracing cooperation, it is good for international development, it is something that China will not hesitate to embrace. And I think that has a higher message, that not only is it practically valuable to Hong Kong as an international financial center, but that also, it shows how at a macro level, this is the kind of thinking that is underpinning the success of anything East-West related, which is you can't ask whether this is East or West as your most important question. You have to ask whether this actually helps the relationship as your question. And to that, I say common law is very, very much helpful to Hong Kong as an international financial center. It is helpful to Hong Kong. It is helpful to the international players in Hong Kong.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good show. As our main engine of Hong Kong's status as IFC, the Hong Kong EX that you lead aims to distinguish itself as a leading listing global platform. So HKEX has launched numerous initiatives, and most recently, a new set of listing rules. How effective do you think these new rules that you introduce will be attracting more Chinese, more overseas, more international companies to list in Hong Kong?
Well, thank you, Darrell. And let me start by perhaps making a linkage in order to answer that question between the title of this event and what we do and what we're trying to do. I mean, the title of progressing through collaboration and connecting the world. These are very, very important. One of the first things that I actually did when I joined the exchange is make sure that, look at the purpose. What's our purpose? What we're trying to do? And we ended up with a purpose which is to connect, promote, and progress our markets and the communities they support for the benefit of all. So it's very important as an infrastructure what we're trying to do, and we're going to achieve this through 3 strategic principles, 3 things that we're focusing on. First one, connecting China and the world. And I'm not going to spend time because Ronnie already said it. Be smart, okay? So connecting China and the world, it makes sense. We have a very unique advantage of being the most Chinese city outside of the mainland and the most international city of China. This is very, very unique. Second one, connecting capital with opportunities. We need to find those linkages of how the financial world can actually help the development of our societies. This is very, very important. Make a link between finance and the real economy. And we spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I'll come back to the listing, which is precisely where this ties, very well. And the third one that we have is connecting today with tomorrow, and that has a lot of implications, not only from the fact that most of the world is moving towards East. In just like 10 years, around 50% of the world GDP will come from Asia. So it makes sense to think about the future and how do we connect today with tomorrow, but also all the technological changes that are happening in our world and the importance of technology and how do we take advantage of that and how do we leverage all these changes in the industry. Now, with respect to listing, in 2018, we made some fundamental changes to our listing rules. And three things that were changed in particular. One, we made it easier for new economy companies to list. Many new economy companies had weighted voting rights, and it was very, very difficult to access the Hong Kong market because those economies were reliant on some innovators, some founders that were critical to the success of the companies, and they preferred to have, weighted voting rights. So that change was implemented together with also the possibility of attracting some companies that decided to list in the US, and since they didn't have that possibility, and so providing an easy way for companies to come back to Hong Kong. That was extremely successful. Since then, about $1 trillion Hong Kong dollars was raised through 265 new economy companies that decided to come back to Hong Kong or to list in Hong Kong or to choose Hong Kong. Another one was the decision to change a regime to allow Hong Kong to develop as a biotech fundraising hub. Once again, that was extremely successful. 112 companies since 2018 have actually chosen to raise money in Hong Kong. Many of these companies don't even have revenues. These are pre-revenue companies, and they raised over 250 billion Hong Kong dollars. So imagine all that capital being put to work to actually generate, new discoveries, new medicines that are very important for the healthcare industry. And then we have to continue thinking. And we're now focusing on some important areas. And I'll mention just two of them, given that they are very much in the news lately. One of them is the new chapter that we have developed. It's called Chapter 18C, to take into account the companies of tomorrow. These are companies in artificial intelligence, companies that will try to develop new technologies to capture carbon, for example. Companies in advanced computing, food technology. Some of those companies don't have revenues, and they wouldn't make it to our main board listing requirements. But with these new rules, essentially, if you have the right investment in R&D, if you have the right capital partners, then you would qualify. So that new chapter has generated a lot of attention. The other thing that is also important in the idea of connecting with the world, and this is incredibly important. Typically, many people think of, Hong Kong is just like a way of capturing international money to actually put it to work for Chinese companies. Actually, what has been done in the last year is something quite the opposite. It's allowing international companies to come and list in Hong Kong and take advantage for the first time of that pool of capital from the mainland that will now be able to participate in investment opportunities internationally. Now, there are some requirements that need to be followed, but the reality is the opportunity for southbound investors from the mainland through Stock Connect to participate in companies that are listed in Hong Kong that qualify for Stock Connect. It's just like so important, because that narrative of Hong Kong is just to finance Chinese companies and use international capital. It's not really like that. The objective is to make this a two-way flow, to make it a capital center where capital and opportunities can meet. And it doesn't matter if it's like international capital or domestic Chinese capital, and it doesn't matter if it's opportunities from anywhere in the world. If we can do that, we're going to create a critical mass in certain industries, particularly around technology, that is going to be incredibly exciting for the future.
Good job. I hope that you will lead Hong Kong Stock Exchange to be the global IPO champion this year, okay? So, David, as Gucho just said, Hong Kong's value has much to do with us being core part of China. What, in your opinion, is the greatest value of one country, two systems? And as Hong Kong and China emerges from the pandemic and seeks to re-engage with the world, what advice would you give all of us friends here who are seeking to tell the story of one country, two systems on the international stage? Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, firstly, Daryl, for shortening the session and collaborating so I can catch a flight to Beijing straight after this. That's very kind and thoughtful. And secondly, thank you for this question, because I'm so glad that all the previous speakers has answered the one country, two system so well already. And I've been trying to think how not to repeat all the words of wisdoms that's been shared by everybody. And I just invariably, in being in Hong Kong, thought about food, and in particular seafood. And you know, Hong Kong is such a unique place. And I really remember we're family friends, and all our previous generations, they're so particular about their seafood, particularly the fish in Hong Kong. They will never be caught dead having the fish from a tank, or even from the clear waters of Philippines or Taiwan or elsewhere. They will always pull out the rod and the string for those who are discerning to catch a fish from the Hong Kong waters. Why? Because it's the unique ecosystem of the fresh water coming, well, reasonably fresh water coming out from Pearl River Delta, as well as the sea waters where it's mixed. It's where the food comes in, and it's got this specific texture. And this is exactly the uniqueness of Hong Kong people that people talk about. It really is, it really is special. And I think this is where one country, two system is completely unique. It isn't present in anywhere else. There are people that misconstrued and look at with some lack of confidence. But I think this is what exactly makes it thrive. And I think, Lawrence, primarily it is this two system. It is a common law system that frames the financial framework, that frames opportunities for companies in China to come to Hong Kong. It frames international investors to come to Hong Kong. It helps all the building blocks for the stock exchange and everything. And I think that's absolutely necessary to be kept. Now, I think when we look at what we need to speak about the two system and the threat of it is clearly the threat of not two systems. and so that's exactly what we need to protect ourselves with. I think that sometimes when we look at, and so much work and efforts has been done just in the financial industries on connects in the stock exchange between banks of Angel and ourselves, it's very easy to be tempted to the path of least resistance, but it's critically important to hold the legal integrity of Hong Kong and to really hold this separate system. I think the key word to take away is we're trying to drive unity and not uniformity. it's very easy for Hong Kong to have a big pipe of renminbi, a big pipe of capital, and become just another city of Hong Kong. But that's where we have to sort of valiantly defend and continue to speak the unique system here, continue to court the international investors, international companies that comes here. Gucho, ourselves, everybody has been to the Middle East this year multiple times, bringing the companies here. This is the new phase. We already had, speaking a little bit about capital, we are already, as Gucho mentioned, has phenomenal build on the connects to bring investors to Hong Kong, into the Hong Kong market, both fixed income and equity, as well as going in through the Q fee. This is almost a 20-year anniversary now. There are much more to do in terms of now bringing companies apart from Chinese companies. Here we have a rather heavy-loaded Chinese skew for good reasons. I mean, I think around 80% of market cap and turnovers are really Chinese-related companies in H shares, red chips, and Chinese private companies. There's a lot more room to bring Hong Kong as a truly one of the top 3 financial centers, to let them to raise capital, etc. here. This is where renminbi internationalization is phenomenally important. Ronnie spoke about whether there is a risk of the geopolitical tension. There is a risk of the dollar landscape that Hong Kong serves so well as a peg currency. Renminbi internationalization will be a critical piece of the equation. And I think we ran through, again, pretty much about 20 years of that journey. It's quite tricky to trade sometimes when you run for a decade of a currency movement that's largely appreciating and have a high interest rate environment. It would drive one-sided behavior on that. 2016 changed that as renminbi first depreciated after the movement in 2005. We now have a new paradigm as well. We now have renminbi now as the first time primarily a funding currency for global assets, because the interest rate cycle has and the nature of renminbi and dollar has shifted. So it's actually quite unique, because this is a moment where trade and investment and capital of people can really use renminbi as a funding currency and a financing currency, where China and Hong Kong can be the export and creator of that renminbi currency. So I think this is also a critical time to really get to that mass. Whether it's 800 billion or a trillion outstanding deposit, they are really a fraction of a starting point. We know it's a fraction of a starting point because we know renminbi, whether it's FX turnover or trade settlement, etc., they're only 3 or 4%. 3 or 4% of a currency of the largest trading state is just a very underrepresenting volume. So I think much more work to do there.
Thank you, David. Safe trip to Beijing tonight at 7. Angel, in 2022, Citigroup recognized and named Hong Kong as one of the 4 global wealth hubs, including London, Singapore, and UAE, and recentered its focus towards wealth management, which you lead at Citi. What factors have made Hong Kong a primary global wealth hub relative to other cities, and how is Hong Kong well suited for the development of new products, particularly in wealth management? Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. And you put me in a very difficult position, because I'm the last one and I got 1 minute and 13 seconds to answer the question. And it's a very difficult act to follow after David when he used the analogy of freshwater fish catching seafood for talking about renminbi internationalization. So first and foremost, your first sentence is correct. Okay, we are doubling down in investing in wealth management in this part of the world, and there are several key reasons for that, and I just want to cite several facts, to support that. First and foremost, everybody talks about the rise of the Asian middle class, and it is very true. The Asian middle class actually rise a lot, right? From 2 billion to 3.5 billion of middle class that is coming from Asia. And it constitutes about 65%, it will constitute 65% of the world middle class size. So that is where the money is. And I love money, I particularly love other people's money, managing them. So this is where, the business is. And secondly, millionaires, in the past 3 years, both China and India has doubled the size, the number of millionaires. And the third fact, very simple, billionaires. We have 950 billionaires in Asia, which is outnumbering all the rest of the region in the world, okay? So where the money is? Here, okay? So when we talk about wealth management, I don't think just about the banks. I think all of the company who wants to look for growth needs to double down in Asia for wealth management. Is Hong Kong well positioned for it? Yes. Okay, and the reason is very simple, because we are the gateway of China, period. And when we look into China, China gives us, number one, the market, okay? And when we look into the growth of wealth in China, is at a compound rate of 15% annually. And if it is not the highest, it will be one of the highest growth rate in the world. And when we look into the West, many of the mature economy is at a low single digit. So we have the market, for us to serve, and we have the tool, we have the enabler, for us to serve this wealth management market. If you dissect, a little bit the nature of the wealth in China, there is like two groups of assets. One is physical asset, the other is financial asset. 70% of the wealth in China are under physical asset, that is real estate, property, and 30% are in the financial asset. And within the financial asset, 50% are in deposit and cash. So I think the need is very prevalent for wealth management for them, because we need to help doing the diversification of allocation. And even though, when you're homing into the rest of the 50% of the financial asset, most of it is equity and it's a single stock pick, right? So when you look at risk management, when you look at wealth growth, there is tremendous opportunity for us in Hong Kong to service the need. Do we have the enabler here? Definitely. We have the talent. We have the financial infrastructure. The banking industry, the financial industry is very well positioned, to service that. We talk about a lot of the Connect system. We recently have launched the Wealth Management Connect, which also, help us to serve the China market, the wealth management growth a lot better than before. So the long answer to your questions is definitely, Hong Kong is very well positioned. To end, my very quick comment, I think very importantly is not to be complacent. I think we also need to build and continues to build the enablers and the strength, of Hong Kong to be able to continue to serve this market. And I think three areas, we need to put extra focus on. One, the government has already, started very well on the new policy on family office, and I think that will help a lot because the family office needs is rising very fast, in this part of the world. Secondly, is continue to invest in doubling down on financial technology. And thirdly, is to look at how we can strengthen our ability to help mainland China on pension management, because this is one of the biggest gap and need as well in this particular market. I'll end my comment there.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So this has been a fantastic discussion with excitement, humor, and a lot of new details. It's been a real privilege for me. Hong Kong's financial success and our spirit of innovation are core parts of what makes our city truly one of a kind in the world. There's only one Hong Kong. And thank you all for making Hong Kong an even greater place. Thank you all for listening. Thank you.